and welcome to another great webinar training hosted by the Mental Health Counselors of Central Florida. My name is Penny Iannati, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor and your secretary and parliamentarian with the MHCCF. On behalf of the Mental Health Counselors of Central Florida, we are so thrilled to have this opportunity to offer our August 2020 presentation while we all stay in the comfort and safety of our homes and offices. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to be a force of impact to all of us, and we would like to encourage you to follow updates on the latest legislation for our field, including but not limited to laws, rules, and effective orders by going to MHCCF. The Mental Health Counselors of Central Florida organization is currently an approved provider with CE broker for the Florida Board of Mental Health Counseling, Marriage and Family Therapy, and Clinical Social Work. So basically, only clinicians pursuing continuing education units through the Florida 491 board will be processed. Please keep in mind that in order to qualify for CEUs for your viewing of this presentation, you will be required to complete the post-presentation survey, which will only be sent to you via email if you have pre-registered for the event. Details about this process, again, are available at mhccf.com. The emailed survey will be accessible until August 30th, 2020, and on-demand option will be available for members starting on September 1st, 2020. And it will remain active until the end of the year. MHCCF is hosting this extended on-demand option as a perk for our members, in addition to their free attendance to this webinar. Upon receiving your completed survey, we will be submitting this 1-hour CEU credit through CE Broker. And we will also be sending a certificate of completion to your email for your records. We are so thrilled to finally offer you the previously canceled March 2020 training entitled Cultural Competency Starts at Intake. Our awesome presenter, Jenna Burton, is a licensed mental health counselor with over 20 years of experience in the counseling field, where she's helped individuals and families identify their strengths and resolve their challenges through the therapeutic process. She holds a master's degree in mental health and school guidance counseling from Rollins College, and currently has a private practice, Mindful Hearts Institute in Maitland, Florida. Jenna is a certified EMDR therapist, an EMDRIA approved consultant, and a HAP facilitator. She specializes in trauma-based psychosis and schizophrenia, complex trauma, and PTSD, as well as dissociation and adoption and attachment issues. Jenna recently hosted a 10-month cultural competency group featuring the book Cultural Competence and Healing Cultural-Based Trauma with EMDR Therapy. She is currently preparing on a workshop for EMDRIA 2020 entitled Conference Social Drift and the LGBTQ+ community, and hopes to be able to present to this year next year. Jenna's vision is to see individuals and families communicate, connect, and better their best selves. Her approach recognizes how the brain and body are interconnected and that healthy relationships and resolving past traumas are the key to reaching more of our own potential, impacting the people around us in a more constructive way, thus creating healthier families, healthier workplaces, and a healthier world. Please allow me to extend appreciation on behalf of MHCCF to our presenter today, Jenna Burton, for offering her knowledge and insight at this time. I think that having an increased knowledge on the topic of cultural competency can only benefit us as a wildly diverse community of mental health counselors and the exceptional clients that we serve. So, thank you so much for taking the time to dive into this webinar experience with us. This floor is all yours, Jenna.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to present this workshop to you. I attended a workshop with Mark Nickerson a few years ago based on his book, Cultural Competence and Healing Culturally Based Trauma with EMDR Therapy. And after implementing some of the techniques and tools that he taught us, I found that my practice changed the way I interacted with my clients, the way they interacted with me, and I just found a tremendous new way of engaging. I got his permission to do the book study club and got his permission very generously to share this information with you today. Just want to say this training is just a brief introduction into cultural competency. I'm by no means an expert in the field, and it's always changing and growing. And I hope as therapists we continue to do the same. With that, I'm going to begin to share the screen, and here's the objectives for today. So, title, Culturally Competent Intakes and Assessments. The learning objectives for today: define cultural competence and cultural humility, provide practical learning experiences for skill development in completing culturally competent intakes and assessments, and develop an action plan towards becoming more culturally competent when completing intakes and assessments. I also want to say that this workshop was originally designed with an experiential component, and we had to modify it for virtual learning. With that said, at the end of the presentation, Penny and I are going to do some role playing where she's going to use the genogram and ask some of the questions from the ones provided so you can see how it actually works. So, cultural competence. What are your ideas and definitions related to cultural competency? I just want you to take a moment and just think about that for yourself. And now we're going to go over a few other definitions as we move forward of cultural competence, because I think if we were in live, we would see there's no single agreed upon definition of cultural competence, but they did evolve from the core concepts of Cross et al. In 1989. The original definition of culture is an integrated pattern of human behavior that includes thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values of an institution, racial, ethnic, religious, or social group. And now we're going to move a little bit forward to the broader meaning. Although it's changed a little bit over the year. Okay, I got to start again. I got lost.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was afraid to put myself on mute because but you can't see me, right?
I can see you, and that's why I had to stop, because I forgot to move you down, so I couldn't read this. I couldn't read the slide because I forgot to move you down.
Okay, cool. So let me. I'm gonna mute my audio.
How is it this time?
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's so comfortable. I feel very connected to you as a speaker, very relaxed. It's awesome.
Okay, good. All right. So do we think we're going to start again, or should I just start from, like, you know, what's cultural competency, your definition, and then move just into?
Yeah, you're doing fine. You did great. Okay. Wherever you just stopped, you said I got lost at something.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking, so if we go back to, you know, what are your definitions of ideas and related? If Christina stops at that moment, that's okay, a good pause, yes. And then I'll just restart to the next slide.
Okay. Christina, did you hear that? So stop where now? So
we're on after slide 3, because this is slide 3. Yeah. That, and then I'm going to go to slide 4, and then I'm just
perfect.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, Christina, we're going to start again. So, with cultural competence, there's no single agreed upon definition of cultural competence, but they all evolve from the core concepts of Cross et al. 1989. And now we're going to move forward and go over a few definitions to begin our journey towards having a better understanding of cultural competence. Culture. The original culture is an integrated pattern of human behavior that includes thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values, and institutions of a racial, ethnic, religious, or social group. Although it's changed a little bit over the years, I think that this definition still holds true today. In a bigger picture, a person's culture includes their socially important groups, and it's a large part of their daily lives. Also, you'll often see the terms cultural identity and social identity being used interchangeably when you are reviewing the literature or attending workshops in the future. Competence. Simply stated, competence is the capacity or ability to function effectively. And like many things in life, it falls on a continuum ranging from destructiveness, blindness, cultural competence, up to ideally cultural proficiency. And now we're going to begin to put it all together. Cultural competence is a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, agency, or among professionals, enable that system, agency, or those professions to work effectively in cross-cultural situations. More simply put, the ongoing process of learning that leads to an ability to effectively understand, communicate with, and respond to the challenges and opportunities posed by those cultures. It's also being aware of our own worldview and how this impacts our clients. Next, we're going to move to Milton Bennett's 6-stage developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. The first stage is denial. So an individual denies that cultural differences exist. This belief may reflect either physical or social isolation from people of a different cultural background. An example of this is we often hear, speak English, we're okay. And it really ignores the idea that it may not be their first language and they must act like us when they're here. The second stage is defense. An individual acknowledges the existence of certain cultural differences, but because those differences are threatening to their own reality and sense of self, the individual constructs defenses against those differences. An example that you may have heard of, they're stealing our jobs, when it's often the jobs that nobody here wants to do. Minimization. An individual acknowledges cultural differences, but trivializes them, believing that human similarities far outweigh any differences. A recent example is all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter, but some lives need a little bit more help at any given time. Then we move to acceptance. An individual recognizes and values cultural differences without evaluating those differences as positive or negative. First comes respect for cultural differences in behavior, then a deeper respect for cultural differences in values. And an example of this is, I don't eat mayonnaise, but that doesn't mean you don't have to eat mayonnaise. You do you. Adaptation. An individual develops and improves skills for interacting and communicating with people of other cultures. The key skill at this point is perspective, shifting the ability to look at things, at the world through different lenses. Sometimes this is intentional, but sometimes it occurs when circumstances outside of our control change. Some examples include relationships such as a marriage to a person of a different race or culture and the introduction of grandchildren. This shifts the perspective from them to this is my family. One of my favorite recent examples of this was Ryan D., also known as Wheels. And you may be familiar with him if he was the young man in the wheelchair holding up the sign that says, "I'm sorry I'm late, I had a lot to learn." And basically, he moved from the All Lives Matter to the Black Lives Matter mentality and movement after learning about the Black Lives Matter advocacy for disability rights in the 70s. So this is that different kind of shift and adaptation. Next, we move on to integration. An individual in this stage not only values a variety of cultures, but are consistently defining their own identity and evaluating behavior and values in contrast to and in concert with multitude of cultures. So an example is, hey, I tried that recipe that you gave me for your mother's Polish goulash. I really liked it. Then I went to the grocery store and bought some of these ingredients, and now we're going to make it a staple in our house. Thank you for introducing me to that. Next, the essential components of cultural competency. Fairly straightforward. Valuing diversity, having the capacity for cultural self-assessment, being conscious of the dynamics inherent when cultures interact, having institutionalized cultural knowledge, having developed adaptations to service delivery, reflecting an understanding of cultural diversity. And now we're going to move on to begin to explore the idea of cultural humility. Cultural humility is an attitude of openness from which we seek to explore our own cultural perspectives and biases. It creates a natural curiosity that motivates us to learn and expand understanding. It is a process of discovery and self-reflections designed to build honest and trustworthy relationships. The other important factor is it's ongoing. It's a lifelong process to learn not only about another's culture, but about how our own beliefs and cultural identities impact us. It's more than just self-awareness. It requires us to take a step back and look at and understand our own assumptions, biases, beliefs, and values. There are three factors that are fundamental to cultural humility. First, a commitment to self-evaluation that includes qualities of humility. The commitment to reflect should be lifelong and to improving one's capacity to respond with flexibility. Second is a desire to fix unjust power balances. And finally, it's aspiring to develop a partnership with people and groups to advocate for others. And I just want to clarify, cultural humility is not the same as cultural competence. The focus of cultural competence is on the client's belief systems, and the focus of cultural humility is on the practitioners. And next, we're just going to go through the 6 stages of multicultural counseling. Again, pretty straightforward. Connecting with the client, conducting a culturally relevant assessment, facilitating awareness, setting goals, taking action, instigating change, welcoming feedback. And for a lot of practitioners, this is a difficult area for some of us. And then finally, maintaining accountability. I just want to think about, how does this impact clients? Some of the questions to think about yourself are, what are we missing? What questions aren't we asking as part of our standard intake? Who is seeking treatment? And just as importantly, who's not seeking treatment? And what are your biases? So cultural competent focus areas: understand the general importance and value of viewing clients' individual issues within a cultural context. Understanding the important dimensions of cultural specific to each client, incorporating beliefs, needs, social norms, and maintaining an attitude of humility and curiosity of other cultures while being mindful of seeking to overcome your own cultural biases. Then adapting your therapy methods to your client's cultural context and needs. An adaptation, you often have to be creative and thinking outside of the box. I was working with a Jewish family, and the father often brought in the child without the mother. According to their religious beliefs, they didn't allow for the father to be alone with me in the office as a female. And it made it very difficult to, discuss the child while we were alone and sending her, being unable to send her, off to the waiting area. So we came up and devised the idea that if we invite mom on FaceTime, then mom's in the room, she's there, she was present, and this was just a creative resolution to the problem that the client came up with, and we just modified it to work. Then, as appropriate, providing psychosocial education to clients, and acknowledging and empowering your clients in the face of culturally oppressive or stigmatizing conditions, including discriminations and microaggressions. Note, as appropriate for the client's current situation and safety concerns. Always being mindful to do no harm when you're asking clients to set boundaries or become more assertive. Kind of question to yourself, is this safe for the client? Will the client be at risk of retaliation at work? Are they going to be fired? Are they going to be ostracized? Or is this going to create concerns in their family if they're not ready to address some of these, concerns? And we don't want it to be viewed as disrespectful or have them be shunned from the family if they're looking at, oh, I want to be more assertive, but this is not really part of my culture. And kind of brainstorm appropriate ways to do it. Then, implementing therapeutic interactions and interventions that effectively treat the internalized effects of culturally based traumas. And then implementing therapeutic interventions that effectively treat clients with culturally related prejudice and discriminatory behaviors, thereby reducing the legacy of cultural-based traumas. This last one is often a lot more challenging, and there's an ongoing debate on whether it's appropriate to address a client's prejudice or if we're to unconditionally accept the client. This is really part of a much larger discussion and one that can be addressed on an individual basis, but just something to consider for yourself and your practice going forward. Align with and supporting humanitarian efforts for social change, including client empowerment, policy reforms, social justice, supporting and joining organizations that support cultural competence of mental health practitioners, and obtaining ongoing education. These are just areas of focus, and if you're willing and able to further your journey, I encourage you to do so. So, thinking about this in a different way, where do we start? The intake assessment. Just thinking about, do you or your agency have a standard intake questionnaire? What type of questions do you normally ask? Are you required to fill in the boxes? And what this information might be missed with those standardized intakes. Again, Mark Nickerson has graciously allowed me to copy these verbatim. So just a few of the intake questions that you might have on your own. So can I ask you some questions about your social and cultural experiences? If yes, what social or cultural groups are most important to you? Some positive, negative qualities you associate with these groups? Are there ways you can better understand yourself or issues that brought you to therapy in a social or cultural context? What would help me understand more about your groups? What are some sources of pride or shame for your social group? Have you ever had to hide your identity? Have you ever felt seriously misunderstood or misjudged related to your social identity? Do you have any memories of being avoided, shunned, ostracized, or devalued related to social dynamic? Do you currently experience social microaggressions? And this is really an area that has been receiving a lot more attention, and I'm noticing some of the agencies, especially clinicians in private practice, are updating these questions, but it still varies. For example, some intakes still ask for legal name and preferred name. Others have just name, gender, preferred pronouns, and even preferred pronouns. This is an area where there's, again, a lot of ongoing discussion about the use of preferred versus just pronouns. So again, just something to think about that works for you and your clients in your practice. Again, a few more. Have these experiences impacted you? When did you become first aware of differences? Do these differences have a positive or negative meaning? Do you avoid certain types of people? Get upset by certain types of people? Feel powerless or unsafe or inferior or superior to certain types of people? So now we're going to begin to delve a little bit more into the experiential components that Penny and I are going to do later. So a culturally focused genogram can be a valuable tool to explore your cultural identity with your client. diagramming an ancestral map can generate valuable insight into forces that have shaped who your client is today. And the questions, and you'll see them next, are very specific, and you've got the slide to help you explore the perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors of members of your client's cultural group. So I wanted to share, this is a little bit different type of genogram. And I just wanted to offer it to you because if you look at it, it was originally designed for clients who might have more than one racial identity. So if you can see at the bottom, it's split. So I think many people haven't seen this. So I just wanted to have an opportunity for people to be able to see this. And this may be useful with you and your clients in your practice. Again, with this, just wanted to include the slide to show the various representational symbols used in genograms. It's an example here, and you don't have to use it. And I'm just going to show you the next slide is a little bit a bigger option. So you don't have to use them, but I think some of us who were trained in genograms many years ago, a lot of this information has changed and been updated. And I just wanted you to have the opportunity to see it and hopefully incorporate it into your practice. And now we have the genogram questions. I'm not going to go over and read them because you can read them and you'll hear Penny ask some of these as we go through the experiential component. So that's it for the talking portion of it. So we've got the resources, the bibliography. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you to check out Mark Nickerson's Culturally Competent and Healing Culturally Based Trauma with EMDR Strategies. Although it's promoted as an EMDR book, it really transfers across all different types of therapy and is very useful. So now we're going to go into the genogram role play exercise, and I'm going to bring back Penny. Penny's going to be the therapist. I'll be the client. She's going to create a genogram with me. And in order to keep this kind of fresh and new, we've not really role played this or rehearsed this before. So this is a new experience for both of us. And now I'm going to bring back Penny.
Yay. All right, so we haven't practiced this, so here we go. This is like we've done a breakout, right? So here we go. So, all right, so Jenna, you are my client, and I'm gonna ask you, so Jenna, tell me a little about your family, and I just want to get to know you and your family and your culture a little bit better. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to kind of diagram out a genogram of kind of how the flow has been through your world.
Okay.
So do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister.
You have a sister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what's her name?
Laura.
Laura. All right. And how about your parents?
Well, I had parents, so Karen and Dave, but they're both deceased.
Okay, so they are both deceased. Okay. And did your sister have any children?
No.
No children. Okay.
No.
And how about you? What's your life like?
Oh, very happily divorced with no kids.
Divorced, no kids. I think you said you had some dogs.
I do. I have 2 dogs. I have a service dog, Bernie, who is the enormous dog de Bordeaux, and I have a little French bulldog who is a therapy fail.
Okay, a therapy fail. Okay, so I think that's an important part of your genogram. I don't know if that's right or not, but we're going to just put it in there because that's a part of your family, right?
It is, and it's definitely, they're definitely a support for me.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to ask you a few of the questions. How about your parents' parents?
Huh? So this is interesting because we've gone through the research and don't really know a whole lot on some of it. So my mother, my maternal grandfather is Polish and was born here. My maternal grandmother was, she's British, conceived in Britain, born in Canada, in Quebec.
Okay.
My paternal grandmother is Polish and was born in the United States. My maternal grandfather, we don't have much history. He died when my dad was 3, and we've tried to find information, and half of it says that he was born here because there's a man who has a similar name and similar birthday, married to a similar woman who was born here. And then there's another man with a similar name, similar date of birth, married to a similar woman who emigrated from Poland. So that's an area that my sister is continuing to delve in to find out if he was born here or not born here. We're unsure.
Okay. So a lot of ongoing to be determined.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, how would you say that you identify?
That's interesting. So definitely, I've got the very dry British sense of humor. I think I was very fortunate because my dad, because his father died when he was so young, he was essentially adopted by an Italian family. And I grew up thinking I had 3 sets of grandparents, which was very weird for someone growing up whose parents never divorced. And that caused a whole scandal when I was in the 1st grade. Because my teacher, we kind of did a family tree, and I said, oh, these are my grandparents, these are my grandparents, these are my grandparents. And she said, oh, your parents are divorced. And back in the 70s, that was big deal. You were in the out group if your parents were divorced. And I remember going home and just sobbing to my mom, like, he's not my real dad, you're divorced. And then, at that young age, like 6, them explaining, no, your grandfather died. He was adopted by this family. So yes, they're your family. They're not biologically related. But that was the majority of time I spent with my maternal grandparents, and with them, I spent equal amount of time, and even less with my paternal grandmother. So I have a very strong Italian history and cultural component that is by no means blood related. However, when I look at pictures, I look just like that Italian family. I look more like them than my biological family, and there's no blood relation.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you feel very connected to that side, to the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let me ask you something. How are gender roles defined within your group?
That's an interesting question. I come from a strong line of women, and very matriarchal. We were all encouraged to, think for ourselves. Every female in my family has worked, including my grandmother. Because when her husband died, she didn't have an option. She had to work. And it's interesting because even though with the Italian, it's very patriarchal, I was always allowed to join in. I was allowed to cook on Sundays because in their culture, my grandmother cooked except for Sundays when my grandfather made, the sauce. And no other female was allowed in the kitchen when he was doing that. But I got to come in and, even as, like an outsider, because I'm a female and I'm not really blood related, I got to learn that the family secret. So I know all the spices and the real recipe.
It sounds like it made you very connected, and you learned a lot, and you felt, really a part of the group.
Oh yeah. So like with like my grandpa Marietti, that was that was it. I one of the absolute favorite grandchildren, and I say that with all due respect to my sister and all my cousins.
Awesome. So, well, thank you for sharing that with me. The next question is kind of like, how is sexual orientation regarded in your group?
I think because my family came from such a long line of helpers, and I grew up in a fairly, you can't tell by the way I look, but I grew up in a fairly diverse family. And I think it wasn't really talked about and never mentioned, but it was accepted. My aunt Eleanor was a lesbian, and she had my aunt Pat. And growing up, there was no comment about it. It was just, oh, that's my aunt Pat, and they were together. So it wasn't really acknowledged, but it wasn't an issue.
Okay. Describe the relationship between the group identities and your national ancestry.
That's always interesting. It's sometimes hard because you're Polish, and there's always the jokes. Oh, you're stupid. Oh, the Polak. The ongoing jokes of on the Coke can, you're looking at it's like open other end. So that I think I hit a lot of that growing up, and just because of the way I look, I have a more olive complexion. Thinking coming from Great Britain and Poland, just a whole bunch of pasty white people. But I have a much darker complexion, so I was able to quote pass for Italian. And I didn't get made fun of the way that even my sister, who's even more fair complexion, and definitely my cousins. So it was like, oh, okay, you're Italian, you're fine. So I didn't get as many jokes until they found out, that I was Polish. And I hid that part quite a bit for many years.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, you identified with several groups. You felt like what people see, you connected to the one group. What would you say the prejudice and the stereotypes, does this group have about itself?
It's interesting because like Italians, we're always right, very loud, boisterous. I am going to do anything for you. From the Polish side, and I see it especially just, I was in Poland last November, and it appears at first very introverted, just even as an entire, culture. I kind of see this, that it's slow to warm up. But even, once they know you, you're my best friend. And it was always, interesting to think about, okay, who am I? Where am I from? And it wasn't until I kind of got older that I began to, want to explore some of these things and really just take on, that ownness that, okay, I'm Polish. Okay, wow. Looking at, because I went to visit Auschwitz, like, oh, wow. We were able to help, people escape, that we were, persecuted. But when you look at, just some things like, the food, and the pottery and some of those things, it's like, oh, okay, there's definitely a sense of national pride that I really kind of wasn't aware of until I went over to visit.
Okay, thank you. How is family defined in your group? And what kind of effect has that had on you?
It's interesting because I come from everybody has two kids. So my grandparents had two kids. My uncle has two kids. My parents had two kids. But we incorporated everybody. There wasn't a stranger. My aunt is from Germany. My grandmother was born in Canada and, came back. I have lots of, extended, family. When I say that, through marriage in Canada. Growing up, my dad's best friend was from Spain. And it was just interesting to be able to see all of these, different cultures represented that I kind of took on as my own. And we all just everybody just came in, and there really wasn't a too much of a sense of like, you're different, I'm different. It was just like, yeah, we don't know a stranger. And especially if you can cook, we're good.
That sounds very exciting. How does this group view outsiders in general and mental health professionals specifically?
I think that's where I am very fortunate. Um, Again, with the outsiders, my family is, you know, they brought it in. You know, have the Italian who adopted my dad. My aunt is from Germany. My cousins were born in Germany. My grandmother was from Canada. My cousin married a Canadian man and had 2 kids, and then divorced and, you know, moved back. And I think looking at mental health, I am very fortunate because this was always something that was encouraged and talked about. You can go to counseling. You can, you know, you can get help. There wasn't a shame and a stigma to it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I don't have any more questions. Here's my little drawing I made. I don't know how great that is. There's your little dog.
Ah,
Good dog.
I appreciate you adding him and well, adding them.
Yes, it was ×2. It was ×2 on there. Well, that was very interesting. I learned a lot about you with just the 3 or 4 questions that we went through.
Right. So I wanted to just do a little debrief so everybody can kind of get an idea of what it was like for you to ask those different questions. Was it comfortable, uncomfortable? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, there's a lot of questions you can ask. And I think just kind of knowing where you're going to go, but you don't really know where a conversation is going to go a lot of times. And, I noticed that, there were certain times, if you really were my client, I would have stayed on that question a lot longer because I saw some emotion come up with certain things where, it made you happy or you weren't so happy and, that perception and how that maybe that's impacted you. So I could see that this could last many sessions with, these questions, a whole lot of sessions. But it's really nice to kind of see where someone comes from and how, that cultural, and we here in, this area, we have a huge, diverse population. So it's definitely going to change the way I interact with my clients. So it's kind of exciting. I haven't really used it in my practice. I learned it in school, but like I told you, I haven't really, I asked certain questions, but these really get to the nitty gritty of things.
So I'm just wondering, is there any of those questions that you looked at, you're like, I'm not asking that?
No. And sometimes religion makes people pretty uncomfortable, their sexual orientation, but I think it's important to know all of those things to kind of get to see that person as a whole person.
Well, I really appreciate you kind of stepping out to do this, and that everybody can get this opportunity to see, what it would have been like in person.
Yeah, this has been really cool. And I really appreciate everything. It's been very enlightening.
All right. So with that, I appreciate everybody for coming to the workshop. I hope that you are able to take some of this information. Again, it's just a snippet. And I'm always glad to have a phone conversation or now a Zoom meeting if you have any follow-up questions. So I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to hand it back to Penny to wrap it up.
Excellent. Thank you. Wow, Jenna, I had a great time. Thank you so much for being so thorough and informative with your genogram activity and all the information. I know everybody's going to learn a lot and, grow from this opportunity. And thank you to our viewers. Please keep in mind that if you are interested in accruing continuing education units for your viewing of this presentation, don't forget to complete the survey, which will be sent to your email as long as you've pre-registered by August 21st, 2020 for this event. You can go to MHCCF.com for details. And as a reminder, members can access this webinar presentation to the end of 2020. Please make sure you keep an eye out for details and availability of another wonderful presentation soon. May we all continue to remain healthy and feel connected even during these impactful times. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great one. Bye.